You are listening to The Evidence Locker. Today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/Evidence Locker and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/Evidence Locker. Our cases have been researched using open source and archive materials. It deals with true crimes and real people. Each episode is produced with the utmost respect to the victims, their families, and loved ones. October 27th, 2016. The day everyone in Jakarta, Indonesia, had been waiting for months. The gavel-to-gavel coverage of this high-profile case became a daily soap opera, which viewers followed religiously. The person on trial was 28-year-old Jessica Wong, an Indonesian-born Australian resident who was accused of poisoning her best friend by lacing her coffee with cyanide. All of this happened in broad daylight in an upmarket cafe in Jakarta. The case divided opinion in a country where less than 20% of the population make up the wealthy upper class. The majority of the people have low income and survive on as little as $4 a day. Jessica Wong was part of the elite, people whose children studied abroad and spent most of their time sipping expensive drinks in posh establishments. The life she led was pretty much like the glamorous lives of those portrayed on TV soap operas, or cinetrons as they are known in Indonesia. Cinetrons are similar in style to telenovela dramas where larger-than-life characters lead luxury lives full of backstabbing and intrigue. Often, the heroine comes out on top, fighting injustice, whether she's the actual villain or not. Back to real life, though. Jessica Wong certainly did not look like a malicious murderer. She was slender, with silky black hair and a bright smile. People found it hard to believe that this refined young lady could have done something so callous. To upper-class Indonesians, Jessica was innocent, a victim of a corrupt system out to frame her, despite lacking evidence. To the average person, she looked like a rich, spoiled manipulator who tried to get away with murder. But in the end, it was Jessica's bizarre smile and candid statements that made people feel uneasy about her. Throughout the trial, she smiled and laughed most of the time. It seemed that Jessica Wong loved to have the spotlight on her. At press conferences, she looked more like a game show contestant who had just won a prize than someone accused of murdering their best friend. Prosecutors weren't about to let her off the hook. They pursued the death sentence, which in Indonesian means death by firing squad. The nation held their breaths as the sentence was about to be passed down. When the judges read the verdict, you could hear a pin drop. Jessica Wong was found guilty of the premeditated murder of her friend, Wayan Mirna Salihin. How did their friendship turn so sour that Jessica decided Mirna deserved to die? Jessica Kumala Wong was born in Jakarta, Indonesia in 1988 into a super wealthy family. She was the youngest of 3 children of Imelda and Winardi Wong and known to be a reserved but spoiled child. Her family owns a large company which deals in imported plastics. In fact, the largest distributor of plastic in Australia. Some people call Winardi Wong the Plastic King. In a country like Indonesia, where the majority of people live in poverty, Jessica was one of the lucky ones. She had everything she could ever need, and much more. In 2005, Jessica's parents moved to Sydney, Australia, where most of Winardi's business interests were. The family bought a home in the exclusive harbourside suburb of Double Bay. Double Bay is one of the wealthiest spots in Sydney. Plots are relatively small, but they are worth millions. Millions that Jessica's dad, Winardi, had to spare. He bought 2 plots of land right next to each other. However, the teenage Jessica did not move with them. She stayed in Jakarta to finish high school. The Wongso household had staff to care for Jessica in this time. Jessica's family members remember that she always loved playing computer games and drawing. This combination of interests led to her decision to study graphic design. So when Jessica finished school in 2008, she embarked on a great adventure. She joined the rest of her family in Sydney, Australia, and enrolled to study at Billy Blue College of Design. Although Jessica's older siblings, a brother and sister, both lived in Australia too, Jessica hardly ever saw them. She settled into student life and made many friends. Her college friends found Jessica to be goofy and bubbly and good fun to hang out with. It was exactly these traits that caught the attention of another Indonesian-born student at Billy Blue called Myrna Salihin. Myrna and her boyfriend Arif Somarko had both gone down under to study. But with Arif in Melbourne and Myrna in Sydney, Myrna found herself open to making some friends. Myrna and Jessica hit it off straight away. They had a lot in common. Both were from super wealthy Jakartan families, they loved design, and had strong personalities. Myrna attended an exclusive international school in Jakarta. Her life contrasted from Jessica's in that her family was close-knit. Myrna, as one of a twin, always had love and support. Life in Sydney was fun, and Myrna quickly became good friends with Jessica's friends too. The 4 gorgeous and glitzy Jakartan girls, Jessica, Myrna, Hani, and Vera, hung out all the time and enjoyed the routine of doing design assignments, attending lectures by day and partying by night. But all good things come to an end, and once she finished her degree in design, Myrna was ready to go back home with her boyfriend Arif to start their life in Jakarta together. Jessica became an Australian resident and stayed in Sydney where her family was. By this time, Myrna and Arif had been together for 8 years and were excited to get engaged. Myrna didn't really look for work and spent some time settling into Jakarta high society as a socialite. In June 2015, Myrna went to Sydney for a holiday. She wanted to catch up with some of her college friends and spent some idle time in the lovely harbor city. She let Jessica know that she was in town and the two met up for dinner. Things turned sour when Myrna gave Jessica advice to dump her Australian boyfriend. She thought Jessica was wasting her time and could do better. Myrna felt that Jessica's beau was into drugs and posed a danger to Jessica. Myrna was known to be quite opinionated and would speak her mind, especially to her friends. Throughout the conversation, Jessica was quiet. She didn't respond to anything Myrna said. When Myrna was done talking, Jessica simply got up halfway through her meal and left Myrna in the restaurant without saying goodbye. Myrna realized she must have crossed the line. This was very clear. After the dinner, Myrna felt uneasy about Jessica. She told her fiancé, Arif, that she didn't want to see Jessica by herself again. She said the next time she would definitely take somebody with her, either Arif or one of their mutual friends, Hani or Vera. But for the most part, with Myrna living in Jakarta and Jessica in Sydney, the friends didn't have much contact anymore. In November of 2015, 5 months after meeting Jessica in Sydney, Myrna married Arif in Bali. The couple had a fairy tale wedding. No expense was spared. But Myrna didn't want to invite Jessica to the wedding. When Arif asked her about it, she simply brushed it off and said she didn't feel comfortable with Jessica and didn't want anything to potentially spoil their wedding day. She did, however, invite Hani and Vera, the friends she made through Jessica while living in Sydney. Myrna was beautiful and intelligent, had a doting husband, and was well liked by anyone who met her. Her life was just about perfect. Then there was Jessica. Things were not quite as picture perfect in her life. She was living alone in an apartment in Sydney's bustling inner west suburb of Leichhardt. In 2015, in the space of 1 year, Jessica was taken to hospital 5 times after failed suicide attempts or self-harm incidents. On Australia Day, January 26th in 2015, Patrick O'Connor, the boyfriend who was to become the trigger for Jessica and Myrna's feud just 6 months later, called the police. He reported that Jessica had threatened to kill herself with a knife. In August of the same year, Jessica Wong crashed her car into a nursing home near her home at 2:20 a.m. Her sporty red Audi A3 hit a gutter and she lost control. The car became airborne and plowed straight through a brick wall, yards away from the bedrooms of elderly residents. The impact woke most of the residents, and the whole area was soon a chaotic scene with confused residents mulling around, observing the car wedged into the building. The incident attracted a news camera crew, and there was footage of an injured Jessica inside an ambulance. She had been drinking, and considering the damage caused to her car, she came off lightly. She had a couple of cracked ribs and some bruises, but that was it. 2 months later, Jessica's boyfriend Patrick O'Connor called police again, telling them that Jessica had tried to poison herself with the carbon monoxide from a small barbecue inside her bedroom. Nothing happened to Jessica on this occasion. She remained unharmed. 2 weeks later, police were called to Jessica's Leichhardt apartment once more. This time, they found an empty bottle of whiskey next to her bed with 3 letters. One letter said that Patrick O'Connor was to blame for her death. The other letters were addressed to her family and to work, suicide notes in which she said her goodbyes. By the end of November, Patrick had had enough, and he approached police to seek a restraining order against Jessica. According to Patrick, Jessica sent him multiple voice messages and text messages threatening to harm herself again. She was also constantly contacting and harassing his friends and family. He felt that she was unstable and feared for his own safety. He stated that her behavior was escalating. Patrick's car had been vandalized, and he suspected the culprit was Jessica. After further investigation, however, police proved that it wasn't Jessica who vandalized the car. But regardless, there was enough reason for Patrick to be granted an urgent protection order. Jessica was due in court in Sydney in February 2017 for drunk driving charges. Her downward spiral continued when she was fired from her job as a graphic designer at New South Wales Ambulance. This was rock bottom for Jessica. She had alienated her boyfriend, she had lost her job, and there was an upcoming trial. There was nothing left for her in Sydney, so she decided to go back to Jakarta and make a fresh start. Later on, Jessica's decision to go to Jakarta appeared to have had a much darker motive than simply starting over. Before Jessica left Australia for Jakarta, she had started a WhatsApp chat group with her design friends from Billy Blue. Myrna and Hani were living in Jakarta, and Jessica wanted to see them. She sent the first message on December 5th, one day before she left Sydney. Myrna didn't respond immediately. She took a couple of days to reply to Jessica. When Jessica pushed to make an arrangement to meet up, Myrna agreed that they could go out to dinner. On the 12th of December 2015, Myrna took her new husband, Arif, along to meet Jessica for dinner at a restaurant in North Jakarta. The dinner was quite uneventful, but Jessica said that this was where she heard about Myrna and Arif's wedding for the first time. It must have made for awkward dinner conversation, but not much more about this evening is known. Jessica wanted to gather the girls for coffee and suggested they all met up in January. On the WhatsApp chat group, Jessica was the one who invited Myrna and Hani. They arranged to meet up on Wednesday, January 6th at a cafe in the Grand Indonesian shopping mall. When the date came, Jessica was eager to confirm the coffee date. Around 1 p.m. she said, "Girls, I'll treat you to juice and book a table." Myrna replied to the group saying, "Hello, Jess." Jessica replied, "Which one do you want?" After a while, ignoring the question, Myrna asks where they should meet. Jessica answers, "Olivier." Olivier is an upscale cafe inside the upmarket Grand Indonesian shopping mall. For wealthy socialites, this was a good place to see and be seen. Myrna replied, "Oh yeah, delicious." Jessica responded almost immediately. Based on Hani's suggestion, Myrna carried on. I love their Vietnamese iced coffee." By telling her friend what her favorite drink on the menu was, Myrna effectively sealed her own fate, completely unaware that coffee wasn't the only thing brewing that day. The friends arranged to meet at 5 p.m., but CCTV footage showed Jessica Wongzo arriving more than 90 minutes early. She walked around briefly, looked around a bit, and 2 minutes later she left again. At 4:15, Jessica returned with 3 large paper shopping bags from a bath shop, supposedly presents for her friends. Footage shows her walking around looking for a table. Once she decided where to sit, she looked up at the CCTV camera, then placed the shopping bags on top of the table. By doing this, she blocked the view of the CCTV camera directly. She went to sit down behind the bags and make sure it was a solid barrier. A couple of minutes later, she walked over to the bar and ordered 3 drinks, 2 cocktails and a Vietnamese iced coffee, which she paid for. She returned to her table and changed her position behind the bags. At 4:24, a waiter brought over the drinks. Jessica made sure that all the drinks were behind the shopping bags. Once the waiter had gone, Jessica moved again to the center of the half-moon-shaped booth seat. On camera, you can see her movements. She was busy. If there had been a normal cup of coffee in front of her, you could have assumed that she was simply pouring a spoon of sugar into the cup and stirring it. But Jessica had ordered a cocktail. And the Vietnamese coffee? Let's take a minute to describe the way it was served at Olivier that day. It was a bottomless coffee cup with a filter that was placed on top of a glass of ice. The coffee would drip down through the filter onto the ice. There was no reason to move the top cup off of the glass before drinking it. Yet Jessica's movements were consistent with moving the cup. When she was done, she moved back to the side of the half-moon seat, leaving Myrna's Vietnamese coffee as the centerpiece of the table. Myrna and Hani were 15 minutes late and arrived at 5:15, which means the drinks had been standing on the table for more than 45 minutes. When Jessica saw them, she got up and the friends hugged and said hi. Myrna's body language showed that she wasn't overly comfortable with Jessica. The 3 friends then scooched into the booth, with Myrna in the middle, flanked by Jessica and Hani. Not paying much attention to Hani, whose drink was also waiting, melting away, Jessica pointed to the coffee and said, "This coffee is for you, Myr. You said you wanted it." The very instant Myrna took a sip of her coffee, she noticed something wasn't right. She pulled a face and said, "This is really not good. This is awful." Myrna turned to Hani and asked her to try it. Hani didn't feel like taking a gulp, but she dipped the end of her straw into the coffee, then licked the end of the straw. Hani had less than a drop of Myrna's coffee. Myrna then turned to Jessica and said she should try it, but Jessica did not want to. The coffee remained untouched as the girls tried to work out what the problem was. Myrna waved her hand in front of her face, like she could smell something bad. Then suddenly, next moment, Myrna thrust her head back violently. Vomit foamed out of her mouth as she proceeded to have a seizure. As soon as it started, it stopped. Myrna collapsed. Chaos ensued with waiters and the manager rushing over to help. Hani called her name and tried to wake her up, but Jessica just sat there quietly without reacting or helping. The manager thought perhaps Myrna suffered from epilepsy and had had a seizure. She ordered waitstaff to call an ambulance and bring supportive oxygen. In a scene where tensions were high and people were screaming and crying, Jessica Wongzo can be seen on CCTV footage as calm and devoid of emotion. As first responders rushed in to help Myrna, Jessica confronted the manager and demanded to know what they put in the coffee. The manager felt uneasy straight away. Why was his friend going on about what's inside the drink? The manager told staff not to throw what was left of Myrna's Vietnamese coffee away and sealed it. Hani called Arif and said that Myrna was having seizures and that foam was coming from her mouth. Arif was shocked and made his way to Abdi Waluyo Hospital, where the ambulance was headed with Myrna in central Jakarta. They had only been married a couple of months. He could not lose her so soon. When Myrna arrived at the hospital, she had already passed on, but doctors desperately tried to revive her. It was too late. there was nothing more they could do for this beautiful woman in the prime of her life. Myrna Salihin was pronounced dead at 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, the 6th of January, 2016. Myrna's family and friends were in complete shock. They couldn't understand how Myrna could have died so suddenly. When hearing about her last moments, suspicion fell on Jessica, but even so, it was hard to believe that a friend, a well-educated upper-class young woman like Jessica, could actually kill her friend, and that in broad daylight, in a public place. Could she really have been so brazen? The manager of Olivier handed Myrna's Vietnamese coffee to police on the day of the incident. 3 days later, test results were made public. Police confirmed that the iced coffee contained a lethal dose of cyanide. With Indonesia being a predominantly Muslim country, it is not usual practice to perform an autopsy. In criminal cases, it could be allowed if the family agrees. So police who were involved from the start urged Myrna's family to allow a post-mortem examination. Myrna's family stood firm. They said they did not want to allow it, because they did not want Myrna's body damaged. Investigators promised that the autopsy would be done respectfully. They reached a compromise, where Myrna's family allowed them to take some samples, but due to religious reasons, they did not want to allow a comprehensive autopsy. On Saturday night, the 9th of January, 3 days after Myrna's death, an autopsy was performed at Kramat Jati Police Hospital and concluded in the early morning hours of January 10th. The results stated that there was an anomaly in Myrna's stomach, caused by a corrosive agent. There was also a small amount of cyanide present. However, this did not match up with the toxicology results of tests taken 70 minutes after her death. It tested negative for the presence of cyanide in gastric fluid, the bile, liver, and urine. Myrna's reaction after drinking the coffee was consistent with someone ingesting a large dose of cyanide. It had a dramatic and rapid onset which caused a seizure, whereas chronic systematic exposure to the poison would have a different reaction. Just 2 months after Myrna's family and friends attended her wedding and wished the bride a life of happiness, the same group were gathered around an open casket, struggling to make sense of her death. Jessica was very uncomfortable at the funeral and left when an aunt of Myrna's accused her of poisoning the young bride. Police had their sights set on Jessica, as her behavior on the day of Myrna's death raised a lot of suspicion. Unfortunately, in the shock and confusion of events, Jessica wasn't searched on the day. She had also thrown away the pants she was wearing, saying she had damaged it while trying to help Myrna. However, on the footage, Jessica is never seen to be helping. She hovered uncomfortably in the background while Hani and cafe staff stepped in. Thanks to the manager of Olivier, who had preserved Myrna's drink, police had one solid piece of evidence, the murder weapon, so to speak, a cup of coffee laced with a lethal dose of cyanide. The question of how Jessica had obtained the cyanide arose. Chemical supply companies do stock it, but in order to buy it, you would need some kind of proof that it is for scientific use. The dosage supplied legally would also be limited. Police looked at Jessica and considered whether she had perhaps brought the cyanide into Indonesia from Australia, but thought that might have been too risky. Jessica's friends and colleagues said that she was a determined and resourceful person, so police believe she could have sourced the poison soon after her arrival in Jakarta. Although Indonesia has officially banned cyanide fishing, the method is still used by villagers as an easy way to catch fish. They put a small amount of cyanide in a pond, which doesn't kill the fish, but it does relax the fish and causes them to float to the surface. This method is often used to capture exotic fish before they are sold off to aquariums or privately owned tropical fish tanks. Police could not find any evidence of Jessica ever buying cyanide, and she denied ever having access to the poison. As police investigation into Jessica Wong's heated up, media interest in the case ramped up too, and the whole country followed the drama as rumors surfaced almost daily. The hardest part to understand was why. What would Jessica's motive have been to kill Myrna? Was the fact that Myrna had become closer to Hani and Vera? friends Jessica had introduced her to. Jessica had become the odd one out. She was also the only one of the group Myrna had not invited to her wedding. And with Myrna married to Arif, she grew even more distant from Jessica. The media wasn't satisfied. There had to be more. They desperately tried to dig up dirt. Rumors of a love triangle emerged. The press speculated that Arif and Jessica had dated while they all lived in Australia. This was based on a statement that Jessica had made to a coworker. She had said that her friend Myrna was marrying her ex-boyfriend, meaning Arif. Why she said that was unclear. The truth is, Arif and Jessica only met a couple of times. Arif didn't even study in the same city as the girls and only ever saw Jessica when he visited Myrna. Then there was a whole other rumor that Arif was the mastermind behind Myrna's death. He was reportedly seen talking to the barista at Olivier and offered him about $10,000 to put poison in the coffee. But this could never be substantiated. The barista refuted the claim. The motive behind it was allegedly that Arif stood to pocket a hefty life insurance payout in the event of Myrna's death. Myrna's family strongly denied these accusations and supported Arif in maintaining his innocence. Arif is a young and talented businessman, Myrna's dad said. He did not have a reason to hurt Myrna. Indonesian police had to sort through the stories and accusations and build an evidence-based case against Jessica if they wanted to prosecute. They decided to go to Sydney, where the two women met, in order to investigate Jessica's life before her arrest. In Jakarta, Jessica stated that she resigned from her job in Sydney, and she had decided to relocate to Indonesia, where there were more job opportunities for graphic designers. Police quickly learned that this was not the case. They interviewed Jessica's previous boss, Christy Carter, head of media and marketing for Ambulance, New South Wales, for 9 hours. Christy said that Jessica was a woman with two personalities. She could be sweet and kind in the one instance, then her attitude would change into something more threatening. Christy thought that Jessica was capable of hurting or killing another person. She based this on a conversation she had with Jessica when visiting her in hospital after one of her suicide attempts. According to Christy, Jessica told her that she knew exactly how much poison to use in order to kill somebody. Commenting on Jessica's attitude after driving into a nursing home and nearly killing someone, Christy said that Jessica did not show any remorse. Nearing the end of her employment, Jessica threatened Christy by saying, "You need to die, and your mom has to go too." Jessica was dismissed from her job, and that is when she decided to go back to Jakarta. Christy could never have imagined that only weeks later, Jessica would be suspected of actually committing a murder. Just over 3 weeks after Myrna's death, at 7 a.m. on Saturday, January 30th, police arrested Jessica at a hotel in North Jakarta. They first tried to find her at her family's home the day before, but she was not there. Police found it suspicious that she checked into a hotel without notifying anybody. As soon as she was arrested, Jessica publicly denied poisoning her friend. Her calm and smiling demeanor in front of cameras was also unsettling. Police realized that there would be no confession and that Jessica Wongzo needed a psychological evaluation before they could take her to court. Jakarta Police Psychology Team conducted 2 days' worth of tests in an attempt to establish a motive for the murder. The evaluation concluded that Jessica was a smart, calm, and confident person. However, beneath the surface, she had an amorous narcissist personality. Broadly defined, the amorous narcissist loves to be the center of attention and is unaffected by their inappropriate behavior. They are manipulative and have no remorse about their actions. They lie and cheat to get their way. Bearing this in mind, it could explain why Jessica chose poison to kill her friend, as opposed to a more blatant and openly aggressive method. It was her dirty little secret, planning the whole sordid event. According to Psychology Today, killing someone with poison, by its very nature, requires careful planning and subterfuge. So it comes as no surprise that poisoners tend to be cunning, sneaky, and creative. they can design the murder plan in as much detail as if they were writing the script for a play. They tend to avoid physical confrontation and instead rely on verbal and emotional manipulation to get what they want from others. One report said that perhaps Jessica had a preference for same-sex partners. Perhaps losing Myrna to marriage was too much to bear. If she couldn't have Myrna, neither could Arif. Myrna's dad, Edie Darmawan, disclosed information he had discovered on Myrna's phone in a WhatsApp message from Jessica. There were several intimate, albeit one-sided texts from Jessica to Myrna. One message read, "Mir, I want to kiss you. It's been a long time." The allegation was that Jessica had unrequited feelings for Myrna. Once she found out that Myrna had married Arif, she exacted her revenge. The whole element brought a new dimension to the case. Most Indonesians are not comfortable with homosexuality at all. A recent survey ranked the LGBT community first as the most disliked group among the country's Muslims. The mere suggestion that Jessica could be gay already made her guilty in the eyes of the public. Myrna's family defended Myrna and said that she was definitely not a lesbian and that she had had a warm, heterosexual connection with her husband, who she had dated for 8 years before they married. Jessica adamantly denied being gay, and there was nothing in her past relationships that indicated that she was homosexual or bisexual. Investigators' case against Jessica Wongso was getting stronger, but it still remained a circumstantial case. 6 weeks after the murder, they handed over the case file to prosecutors, but it was returned as prosecutors felt the case was not strong enough. Investigators contacted their counterparts in the Australian Federal Police, or AFP, and requested a dossier regarding Jessica's background while she lived in Australia. As Australia opposes the death penalty, the AFP agreed to cooperate, but Indonesian police had to guarantee that Jessica would not suffer the death penalty should she be found guilty. Indonesian police agreed. The case file would be handed in and sent back a total of 5 times before prosecutors were satisfied and ready to go to trial. It was the end of May by this time, and Jessica had been on remand for 118 days. The media reported on how much weight she had lost and how her detention had caused health concerns. On the 15th of June 2016, 6 months after Myrna Salihin's death, the trial of the century kicked off at Central Jakarta State Court. Prosecution laid charges of premeditated murder against Jessica Wongso for ending her friend's life. They sought the death penalty by firing squad. The whole country was glued to TV screens as the drama unfolded in the ensuing months. Prosecution had a parade of witnesses, and the facts had to be crystal clear, especially after so many months of speculation and half-truths published in sensationalized press reports. Myrna's dad, Edie Darmawan, took the stand and testified that Jessica's behavior at the hospital on the day of Myrna's death was very strange. He said that she was calm and composed as she walked around, even though she had just witnessed her friend die. Hani, who was also present, had a more normal reaction to events. She was in shock and cried most of the time. Arif Somarko, Myrna's husband of only 2 months, testified about Myrna's relationship with Jessica. He said that Myrna was uncomfortable with Jessica, and after their confrontation at a Sydney restaurant about Jessica's boyfriend, Myrna did not want to meet up with Jessica by herself again. He also denied that he had ever had an affair with Jessica and that they only met a couple of times when Myrna was present. Myrna's twin sister Cindy was also called to testify, and she told the court about a strange message she had received from Jessica after Myrna's death. It was an article that Jessica forwarded to Cindy. The article was about a poisonous Vietnamese coffee. Jessica's aim was to convince her that the actual coffee was the cause of Myrna's death and not the cyanide in the coffee. Myrna and Jessica's friend Hani testified that after Myrna was pronounced dead at the hospital on the night of January 6th, she heard Jessica mumble, "I'm sorry." Waitstaff of Olivier testified that Jessica had chosen the table herself, where Myrna and Hani eventually joined her. Jessica also paid for the drinks immediately after ordering, which other customers found to be unusual. However, it is not uncommon to pay the bill when you order in Australia. It could have been a force of habit after living there for so long. Staff did find it strange that Jessica ordered the drinks so long before her friends arrived. Even if they had been on time, the drinks would have sat out on the table for more than a half an hour. In the end, the drinks stewed for 45 minutes before Myrna and Hani drank it. In reviewing the CCTV footage of Jessica while she was waiting for her friends at the cafe, she was seen scratching her hands several times and looking around in a daze. Toxicologist and forensic expert Nursamran Subandi said Jessica might scratch her hand because of exposure to cyanide. When evidence about Jessica's off-the-rail life in Sydney was presented in court, it shocked everyone to learn that this wealthy socialite had 13 police reports behind her name. The urgent restraining order filed by Jessica's ex-boyfriend Patrick O'Connor was probably the most revealing about the dangerous personality that lurked behind Jessica Wongzo's ever-present smile. Things weren't looking good for Jessica, but her highly paid defense team wasn't too worried. They had a couple of aces up their sleeves. In September, the third month of the trial, Australian forensic pathologist Professor Beng Beng Ong explained that Myrna's death was probably not due to cyanide poisoning. The reason, he said, was that there was no cyanide found in Myrna's gastric fluid taken 70 minutes after she died. While the 0.2 grams of cyanide in Myrna's stomach taken a few days after death was likely to have been produced post-death. Forensic pathologist Jaja Surya Atmadja agreed with Professor Ong. He also explained that the cause of death could only be known by conducting a full autopsy. While in conducting Myrna's post-mortem examination, pathologists only took samples of tissue and fluids. Jessica's legal team made it clear that Myrna's death was not necessarily caused by cyanide. She could have suffered from an undiagnosed underlying medical condition. They also pointed out the prosecution had failed to prove where the cyanide was purchased. When Jessica Wongzo testified, you could hear a pin drop. The whole nation was listening to the smiling accused's testimony. She denied poisoning her friend and begged the judge to decide the outcome of her case based on evidence, not speculation. Her manner, always smiling and calmly talking, probably did her case more damage than good. On October the 5th, 2016, Jessica Kumala Wongzo was found guilty of the premeditated murder of her friend Wayan Myrna Salihin. When the judges read the verdict, the courtroom erupted in applause and cheers of relief. The judges who heard the case said that they found the prosecution's theory to be plausible. Jessica's motive to kill Myrna was anger at her friend for advising her to break up with her boyfriend, Patrick O'Connor. They found her behavior on the day of the murder very suspicious. The fact that she went to the cafe hours before to scope it out and then returned with the large shopping bags. All of her actions proved that there was premeditation to the sadistic crime. Jessica and her legal team made a plea, still claiming that Jessica was innocent. They were concerned about Jessica's health in the pitiful, rat-infested cells at the Metro Jaya Police headquarters. Her lawyers ended the plea by saying, "For Jessica, Myrna was a good friend. Myrna's death is Jessica and her family's nightmare." At the end of October, Jessica was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Because of the agreement with Australian Federal Police, she was not given the death sentence. Jessica stood up and said that the trial was biased and that she would appeal. And with that, the soap opera was over, with the accused promising to return and clear her name. The Indonesian nation was still divided, and the coffee killing made for good dinner party conversation. For the average Indonesian, looking at the uber-rich members of society like Jessica Wongzo and Myrna Salihin, this story brought a strange sense of comfort. Even the untouchables have their issues, and things can go terribly wrong, no matter who you are. An interesting thing happened in Jakarta in the wake of this, however. It seems now, the Vietnamese iced coffee has become one of the most popular drinks in cafes throughout the city. If you'd like to read more about this case, have a look at the resources used for this episode in the show notes. Also, visit and like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Evidence Locker Podcast to see more about today's case. If you like our podcast, please subscribe in Apple Podcast or Stitcher or wherever you get your podcasts. We would also appreciate if you could review the episodes, as it gives us some street cred in the world of podcasting. While you're waiting for our next episode, why not listen to one of our podcasting friends?
Hi, I'm Barney Black.
And I'm Tara Saraban.
And we do Bloody Murder.
We're a weekly true crime podcast that focuses on some of the lesser-known crime stories from Australia.
And indeed around the globe.
We're a comedy podcast with a dark sense of humour.
But we're dead serious about murder and the people it affects.
We find humour in some unexpected places.
But never at the expense of the victims or their families.
We've been described as the blue cheese of podcasting.
Addictive, strong and satisfying.
And a bit stinky.
I am not.
You know you are.
Bloody Murder is available on your favourite podcatcher.
This was the Evidence Locker. Thank you for listening.